Okay. Red Bull Rampage. Downhill mountain biking event held every year in Virginia, Utah since 2001. Although Red Bull Rampage is one of the biggest downhill mountain biking events in the entire world, there's never been a women's category. Women have built this course, women have ridden this course, women have participated in a lot of things that have to do with Red Bull Rampage, and they've never gotten an invite to this course. Red Bull Rampage is something that you get invited to because they see you as the top or the best. So you get invited to go to this event, and it's a huge honor to be invited to Red Bull Rampage. But the women have never been invited. As much as they've fought to want to be invited onto this course or have their own category, it's never happened. Hello, my name is Hanna Barney. Welcome to my 2024 TED Talk. My thesis question is, what are the causes and effects of gender inequity in mountain biking? In my thesis, I decided I wanted to research a lot about gender inequality and imbalance in mountain biking. This is out of my own personal interest for the sport because me as a girl, I've seen a lot of this imbalance and I've seen a lot of discrimination, and I just wanted to get into the causes and effects and look into why. So to do this, I split my thesis into two parts. I did causes, effects, and then I also went kind of into solutions for it a little bit. So the first part is causes. Number one, social norms. So social norms and expectations. What are these social structures that are built in our society that causes gender imbalance in mountain biking? Well, a lot of this is because the social norms of what a woman should act like is a lot girly, or you should like to go shopping, or you should like to participate in things that aren't going to get you all dirty or be all gross and manly. But this just isn't true. And as you can see, these social norms go both ways. And there's a lot of things that with men as well are seen as like only for men and shouldn't be seen for women. So for example, like men should like money or cars or sports or be like super invested in that type of stuff. So these social norms in our society have created this like big block in between what men and women are supposed to do. So for mountain biking, it's seen as a very like highly competitive, highly like masculine, dirty. It's definitely a dirty sport. So, so it's like not seen as very feminine. So another thing that I looked into for my causes is the historical expectations of how women should act. So historically, women are seen as this kind of like, so the harder a wife works, the cuter she looks. Like this is kind of what women have historically been seen as, and this is like, you should be cooking for your husband, you should be taking care of the house, you should be taking care of the kids. And historically, women really haven't been like seen as the sports people, or they shouldn't be seen as independent. Like sports, especially outdoor sports, are very independent, and this is not something that has been built into women's culture. So mountain biking also, with this history, has like had a huge breakthrough though. Like biking in general has been a big part of why women are able to participate in sports, because when biking was first invented, it was seen as a form of transportation for people. So that's like kind of a big part of why biking and mountain biking in general is like still being fought for women, because it's like continuously throughout history been a pushing force for women to be able to participate in sports. So another big piece of our causes is this sexualization of women. These three photos are what pops up when I just look up women in mountain biking. These were some of the top photos at the top. We see, I mean, obviously sexualization of women. There's this like huge stigma around like women should be in sports and like be sexy, and like it's for the male gaze, basically. So this creates like this whole idea that the only reason that women are in these sports is to like be for men, and to like, so men can click on the ads, you know, like men want to be able to look at this stuff, and this is like a huge part of why women don't want to participate in these sports, because they don't want to be sexualized. I mean, I know me personally, like as a girl since like late middle school and all throughout my high school experience, I have seen this sexualization. like guys at the mountain biking course have always been like, well, you're so hot because you do sports, or like, oh my god, you ski and bike, like that's so sexy, or like, I just want to date you because you do this. And it's like, that's not what I'm doing it for. And I think that a lot of women feel this exact same way. And especially if we want to like look good during our sports, or like, you know, want to wear our pink, or like want to be more girly, it's kind of just seen in a way of like you're trying to show off to the men. So that's a huge part of this like sexualization in these sports. So our next point that we have for a cause is stereotype threat. So stereotype threat is easily described in this paper that I read up on by Kimberly Armani in her paper, You Throw Like a Girl. And she basically looks into this survey, this study done by people to figure out what stereotype threat is, and like how it's implied in our society. So this like specific example is you put a group of women in a room and you tell them to perform some sort of sport. So this sport could be like basketball, or just like throwing a ball at a wall, right? Like something athletic. And then you'll put in a man in this sport in the same room with these women. And what their conclusion was that women will perform less when there's a male present because of the way that men are supposed to be like better than women. Like there's this idea that we've created in our society that women are just going to be lesser than men. So that's why the women will automatically like be worse in their brains or perform less, because they don't want to like get rid of this idea or like not conform to what their social group is. So another huge part of this is stereotype threat is like a fear that we've instilled in us to not like be different than what our social group tells us to be. So we can see it like all over the place with people not wanting to participate in a certain event because it's seen as a male's event, and that's weird. It goes against your group. It like makes you out of the box. It makes you like not as included in your group if you're like not participating in the things that make you part of your social group. Okay, so then we go to our effects. When I'm looking into my effects of gender inequality, the first thing that we can see is a lack of pay. There's a lack of pay in most sports around us, in between men and women, like in basketball and soccer and everything. Like there's always going to be this lack of pay. A statistic that I found from a study done by Pink Bike is that over 1/5 of male athletes will report making over $100,000 a year with their sports and with their sponsorships. And only 6% of women, compared to 1/5, get even close to $50,000. And the pay range for them is really like different. So a lot of the pro men see at least $100,000 a year with their payments and their sponsorships, and a very, very small amount of women actually see even close to like their bottom range. And this like lack of pay also comes from like these competitions that are being done. So like, for example, this is Gracie right here. She's an awesome downhill mountain biker. She's participated in a lot of events. And she's seen like all throughout growing up, the difference between pay in these competitions for doing the same course, like with the same sponsorship, the same levels of like competitiveness. They'll get paid less just because they're women. Another effect that we see is the lack of representation in the media. So going back to my my point about Red Bull Rampage, like women are not being seen in the media as much at all for this. And when they are being seen in the media, it's in those sexual ways, you know, like showing off their body parts and like, you know, it's very like sexual. So women, with this lack of representation in the media, is where, for like Red Bull Rampage, for example, they have given women a certain like category. So they've given women throughout these years to kind of like make up for their wrongdoings, they're being sexist. They've given them like this, oh, this is women's rampage, whatever, this is like, we're making up for the girls, let's make them happy, let's write some articles about it, like, let's make it all up. But they don't get any recognition. Like, I've talked to multiple people about this women's category, and people are like, oh, I've never heard of it. And these are like big mountain bikers, you know, like a lot of people have heard about Red Bull Rampage because it's a huge event, but people have never heard about this women's rampage because it's not advertised at all. We don't get the same sponsors, and it's basically just like to keep the girls like hush and to like keep them down because they don't want us to be fighting for it anymore. So another thing that we see is this like lack of opportunities to compete. So there's a girl named Casey Brown, who is another huge downhill mountain biker, and she has been on the Red Bull team and has been like working with the Red Bull Rampage team to build all of these courses, and she's proved herself, and a big part of this is like the men can do these flips and the men can do these tricks. Casey Brown and many other women actually can do these flips, but they're not really being seen or they're not being recognized. So there's like a lack of opportunity for women to compete, not only in this Red Bull Rampage event, but all over the place. There's a lot of like male-only categories, or even for example up at Purgatory, like this summer there was a big downhill race. And although there was like a women's category for girls to be able to compete in, compared to like the U12 and the U16 and then like the U20, there was only one like this is for the girls. So instead of having like all of these different women's divisions like they do with the men, there's only this one category for the girls, just so like they have this opportunity if they want to compete. And like me personally, it kind of just makes me feel like lesser, or kind of like I'm being thrown into this situation. So to look more into this, I did my own personal survey throughout my research. And with help from Lori, I got like over 700 responses on this survey. And I got to see people from all over the world answer these questions. And it's how welcomed you feel in the mountain biking community. So I had a lot of questions on this survey that I asked just to kind of get a brief understanding. I had what was your age, what is your gender, and I specified gender in multiple different ways, but in this way I just looked into men and women to keep it simplified for my topic. But I ended up just wanting to get to the bottom of this question, and it's how welcome do you feel in the mountain biking community? So these are my results that I got. As we can see, there's a big difference between the men and the women's, how like very likely or very welcomed category. So 49.5% of men said that they felt very, very welcomed in the mountain biking community, which is compared to 27% of women. See, that's just like a huge difference between this. And then when you look into the not at all, this is actually less than 1. It just came up on the graph as 1. This is like 0.007 men feel not at all compared to 3% of women, which I mean is still a pretty small number, but compared to 0.007% of men feel not welcome, that's a big, big difference. So what's the solution? When I'm looking into my solutions, I looked into a lot of different things of what can fix this. One of which is pretty obvious, is like having girls represented more. You know, like having girls in this media more, having girls being able to participate in these competitions more. But another thing that I have looked into is we need to stop comparing the men to the women. Men and women have biological differences. There are going to be men that are going to be better at these sports. It's just kind of the way that they're built. And I think that we've all accepted this. But the more that we compare the women to the men in these sports, the more that we're like dividing and we're pushing women down. So by having this like women's category where we're recognizing them for their own achievements and for being really good instead of just comparing them to the men, it's going to help them out a lot. Another thing that we can do is just like stop sexualizing girls in sports. Like, I mean, I definitely probably do it myself too. Like, oh, that girl's so hot. Like, she's such a like skier, so she's so cool and hot. But if we just stop this sexualization, like pushing women down or making them feel kind of gross about doing their sport, it'll help a lot. So then why does this matter? So some of you might be asking, like, why does this matter? Why do I care? I don't really mountain bike. But in our community, like, this is a huge thing. Like, if you live in Durango, you know somebody that mountain bikes or you mountain bike. Like, that's just part of how we are. And this matters because there's new generations coming up. There's new generations of girls who want to be in these groups and who need to have these, like, strong female athletes that they can look up to. Like, I know for me, before I was able to, like, find social media or, like, look up to these people that I can see in these events, like, I couldn't name, like, one professional mountain biker woman compared to, like, a bunch of different men. And, like, when I started getting into it even more in, like, 7th and 8th grade, when I started, like, really mountain biking, the faces that I could see is a lot of men. This matters. I mean, like, for people who are growing up in our community and for little girls, like, having these strong influences and these strong people in our lives is going to really help. And I mean, this also matters. I said this in my first presentation that I did it. I want to have more girls on bikes. The more that we can have girls out there participating in this sport and being on the downhill course with me, the better that it'll just make the whole community feel. At Purgatory, I bike with a group of basically all men. There's one like 13-year-old girl who's like super awesome. But like at Purg, I bike with a group of all men, and then in Telluride I have a couple girls that I bike with. But I've always found that it makes you feel a little bit better when you're surrounded by women in sports. So, thank you. That was my TED Talk.